Thursdays are from Metropol Debrief, yet another Thursday. Thank you for making time. This is Metropol TV. Ondiro Ganga is my name. Tonight, what do we have on the show for you? Just as you can see, we are planning to have a really nice conversation on climate change. And we are asking, climate change, is it too late? Is there something we can do so that we combat the effects that will come from climate change? Once upon a time, the late and great Nobel Peace Prize winner, Wangari Maathai, said, if we destroy nature, nature will destroy us. Years later, after we laid her to rest, her words are catching up with us. Drought, flooding, and constant fires in the Amazon. The reality of climate change is taking place and threatening the future of this very world that we live in. That is why tonight on Metropol Debrief, we ask you, as I had said, is it too late, or what needs to be done to avoid further climate change, thus avoiding a looming crisis? And what is the role of Africa in the climate change conversation? Take a look. The world was taken by storm these last 2 weeks, with children from all over the world taking to the streets, marching in protest of climate change, with the hope that their defiance will spur political action. Led by Greta Thunberg, a 16-year-old Swedish climate activist, they are demanding for action. Last week, Greta, speaking during the United General Assembly, said it's time to toe the line and take action, with scientists saying her efforts are building real momentum.
People are suffering, people are dying, entire ecosystems are collapsing. We are in the beginning of a mass extinction, and all you can talk about is money and fairy tales of eternal economic growth. How dare you! For more than 30 years, the science has been crystal clear. How dare you continue to look away and come here saying that you are doing enough when the politics and solutions needed are still nowhere in sight? You say you hear us and that you understand the urgency. But no matter how sad and angry I am, I do not want to believe that. Because if you really understood the situation and still kept on failing to act, then you would be evil, and that I refuse to believe.
Climate change has been a growing concern in the world, with last year the global carbon emission having increased by 2.7% to a record high of 37.1 billion tons. This has increased global temperatures, thus spurring further melting of glaciers, resulting to rising sea levels and worldwide temperature rise. United Nations Secretary Antonio Guterres has equally added his voice in the climate change debate, urging world leaders to quit talk and come up with comprehensive climate mitigation plans and accomplish it for the sake of the next generation.
But one thing is clear. My generation has the obligation to allow them to live in a healthy planet. And we are not fulfilling that obligation. We are destroying the planet in which they will have to live.
However, the world is not short of climate change mitigation agreement, with one of them being the 2015 Paris Agreement. That is an agreement within the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, dealing with greenhouse gases emission mitigation, adaptation, and finance signed in 2016. However, on June 1, 2017, United States President Donald Trump announced that the U.S. would cease all participation in the 2015 Paris Agreement on climate change mitigation.
The Paris Climate Accord is simply the latest example of Washington entering into an agreement that disadvantages the United States to the exclusive benefit of other countries, leaving American workers, who I love, and taxpayers to absorb the cost in terms of lost jobs, lower wages, shuttered factories, and vastly diminished economic production. Thus, as of today, the United States will cease all implementation of the non-binding Paris Accord and the draconian financial and economic burdens the agreement imposes on our country.
Whether Donald Trump believes in climate change or not, from what scientists are saying and nature is proving, climate change is here and is happening. The bad news continues as scientists further say that even if all countries abide by climate change regulations, the world would still be 3 degrees Celsius hotter, which is catastrophic. Very interesting conversation right there. Now, there was a time the earth was doing just fine until we ushered in the Industrial Revolution that was marked with heavy pollution. Carbon emissions in the last 4 years have increased by 4%. Now, besides industrialization, 80% of tropical deforestation has taken place. This is because humans are encroaching forest areas to make room for agricultural land. And this is nothing new. We've seen it even in Kenya, and now there are Mau evictions and the people living in the forest, and it's a back and forth story. There have been court cases ongoing, but the truth of the matter is that humans are encroaching forests just to make room for themselves. Further to this, the climate kitty gets the least allocation globally at 2%. This means there's little to no funds to go into research, innovation, and prevention, and most of the money is spent on mitigation of climate change crisis. For example, governments will set aside money, 1 billion, 2 billion. However, when climate change crisis strikes, that's when we are trying to avert drought, we are trying to avert the consequences of flooding. So little to no money is left to go into the research that comes in. Now, a panel on climate change issued an urgent warning in October 2018 that humanity has just 12 years left to keep global warming below 1.5 degrees Celsius and avoid a climate catastrophe. The same month, WWF released the 2018 Living Planet report, which revealed that the average abundance of more than 4,000 species across the globe has declined by 60% since 1980. Our oceans have also not been left behind, as they've been warming 40% faster than previously thought and are struggling to cope with 12.7 million tons of plastic waste we deposit in them every single year. This is also a story we've seen on the news. We're just seeing marine life getting dead or getting stranded or getting stuck in plastic waste in the forest, in the waters. And this is a conversation that has come to the global front, and people are trying to say, how do we cut our plastic waste? Kenya most recently issued a ban on plastic bags, and that has gone a long way, particularly globally. The president has gotten a lot of accolades for taking this step. Now, you might ask yourself, why should we in the African continent and maybe Kenya care about this climate conversation? Either way, we are not the biggest polluters. We are not the ones who are suffering hurricanes and floods, but here's the reason why you should care. 1, changing weather patterns, which means that Kenya, being an agricultural dependent country and rain-fed agriculture at that, farmers are recording low yield. The second reason you should care, drought. As the region is experiencing longer dry seasons than usual, coupled with very harsh climatic conditions. This is nothing new. We've seen it. And finally, our tourism sector, climate change is causing an extinction of wildlife as they can no longer survive in the harsh climate conditions. Also, the melting of ice is leading to the rise of water levels, thus leaving coastal towns and cities at the risk of flooding and drowning altogether. We are already feeling the effect of the global mess that we have created for ourselves, and that is why, after the break, we are joined by our guest to try and find out, is there a reverse gear for climate change, and how do we approach the issue at hand moving forward? Stay with Metropol TV.